We are live.
See ourselves.
I'm worried that everybody's going to hear me say, I'm going to Tom Cruise the situation, jump on this there as well. Anyways, hey, welcome everybody. We are live now. It's incredibly crazy to me that we are indeed live. We would love to hear from you in the chat. So if you're here, just kind of like
Drop your name, say hi,
put a like on there, subscribe.
hit that little notification button.
What does that do?
It dings, so every time that we go live, it dings and it says PSM is live. It's on my phone.
See, the things I don't know about YouTube, I don't know that.
I like
And
barbecue, so I like.
Oh, hey, Lauren. I just got a text from you that said thanks. And so I will say hi. It's in the whole group chat that I have there. So that's my little, if you don't have a notification on your YouTube,
You can hit the ding button.
you can hit the ding button.
Or down.
Ding, ding, ding. So, a reminder if you have any questions about anything that we're saying, don't feel like you have to hold them in. You can throw them in the chat and we'll get to them as soon as we can. For mid thought, we'll kind of we'll roll that way. And so, oh man, Josh is writing some things. So, yep, he's writing what I basically just said. So it's super fun.
Mike, did you hear about something that's happening on Friday?
What is happening on Friday?
The mall opens up.
Oh well, technically that was supposed to be available last week
It's
on
only
Friday.
certain stores, but the whole mall.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I was gonna go ice skating.
Right. I mean, basically everything. Like people takes. Heather is on watching, so everybody's watching in the DeWard house.
Does it
So
say
Are you telling me that Lark isn't that proficient with the keyboard?
I am indeed. None of the kids are. So.
It's,
Well, hello. Both the Spences are here. My family's here. I wonder if Lindsay's on here.
I bet you my family's not on here.
Shots fired.
I'm all alone.
we're up to 8 viewers, so who knows who's on?
Yeah, who knows until they tell us.
I know.
Uh,
I sing the song at home that I'm all alone. And it's kind of like.
I'm so lonely.
I could
I
just do
have
it.
nobody.
I could sing that song.
On my own. I don't know. I don't want to sing forever. We'll give it just a couple more minutes here to just let some people hopefully hop on. But that being said, what are you most excited about the state kind of opening up on Friday?
Connie and I actually have big plans.
Ooh.
Big plans. We are gonna go put the kids in the car and we're gonna drive around and watch all the people and see if they get coronavirus. And then we're gonna plan if we're gonna go outside or not. So
That's a weird.
and then we're gonna go to Dean and Debbie's Creamery tomorrow.
Oh, look. It looks like Andrew's on here.
Andrew.
Hey, Andrew.
Yeah.
Welcome. Welcome, Andrew Brooks.
What about you? What are you and your family gonna do?
We're trying to see if maybe we can spend some time with a couple friend of ours that we haven't really gotten to see one-on-one since the coronavirus kind of made everything very static. So we're kind of maybe thinking about that, but it's still it's weird to me to think that stuff is gonna actually be open come tomorrow. One of my buddies, his wife is a hairdresser, so I
Okay.
know that she's super pumped. She's fantastic.
Right.
I'll give her a shout out. I like her as a person. Ari Price, she's the best. Hair by Ari.
Okay.
It's a little bit out of my price range.
You don't have much hair for that price.
Yeah,
range
I
either.
know. But she is fantastic and wonderful. Connie says, oh, Connie also believes that we're cool. So I can only assume
Yeah,
that was Isaiah.
I probably think that's Isaiah is very proficient with the keyboard.
So proficient.
He might have used his Siri feature and said, "Save
That-
Mike and Dad."
That voice to talk, it's
Yeah.
the best. Voice to talk. That never has ever backfired for you, right?
Never.
You've never sent me a text that has been not
I'm very embarrassed. I've sent some things to my own mother where I'm just
This is the worst. The text to talk when it's like names are always the worst because you're like, hey, this thing, this name, and it's like, oh yeah, this not the right name.
very
Okay.
much. And then my phone says calling house phony. So yeah,
House phony.
yeah, my
All
house
right.
phone is a phony.
Well, we might as well kind of get started here. It is about 3:33 on a Thursday afternoon.
Can I do an introduction?
The rain just got done, and so we are here.
Do an introduction.
Ronnie would like to do the introduction. So,
All right, perfect.
all right.
My name is Ronnie Smith. I'm with Parkview East Campus. We have Mike DeWard from Central Campus here.
Hey, that's me.
You on
Oh,
Deep Dive. So we're going to
surprising.
be actually doing some deep dive questions on
Yeah.
meaning and purpose.
I ask a lot of questions about meaning because of this gross facial hair that I go in and out of like I can't grow this beautiful beard that Ronald has.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of like slowly like oscillate between gross facial hair and nothing.
Just a clean face.
Yeah, but it's just the way to do things, in my personal opinion. You just gotta, go and just hope that things work out.
You're
So
a classic man. So how about we open up with a question, Mike?
the first question.
The first question. So my first question for you, Mike, is why do I exist?
When I read, so we have a Word document that we shared. So when I read this, it's just like, cause you do. This is like the initial like kind of feeling about this, and really, I mean, I think when we ask this sort of question, we're really kind of asking the idea of like, what am I here for? Why am I even here? And so the easiest place, kind of, I think the smartest place to go is Genesis 1. Like, if we're gonna study anything, maybe the beginning of the Bible is a good place to understand maybe why we personally, all of us as a people, exist. And so, outside of kind of the like dumb answer of because you do,
Thank you.
I would say the simple answer is because God created you and me. And so when we look in Genesis 1, okay, 26 through 28, I'll read it.
Yeah.
I'm going to read from the NLT, or the NOLT, as I like to refer to it as. I add a lot of extra vowels and stuff. So anyways, then God said, let us make human beings in our own image to be like us. They will reign over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, the livestock, all the wild animals on the earth, and the small animals that scurry along the ground. And so God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Then God blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and govern it, reign over the fish of the sea, all that sort of stuff. And look, I've given you every seed-bearing plant throughout the earth and all the fruit trees for your food. And so when you look at this and you kind of see why do we exist? Well, the first one is because this is the thought process is because God created you. Okay, the world might say, I think wrongly, that you and I are an accident, a mathematical oddity at best. At worst, we're just this random thing that happened. And God kind of initially, if you look at it, those are the only two kind of answers that we have to this question of why do I exist? The first one is that, I just kind of magically showed up, which is a faith statement in its own self, or that God created me, which is a true and honest faith statement as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we look in Genesis 1 at the account, and I would point you to kind of the way that I'm going to view this is the Bible is the absolute truth, that what it says in there is true, and that we are going to operate under that assumption. So I'm not going to go through and explain to you why exactly I believe that, but I do believe Jesus Christ died on a cross, rose again, and doing so because he raised himself from the dead, that God came down to earth and saved us for our sins. So if he believes in the Old Testament, so will I. And so in that case, when you look at it, the kind of more like specific answer, maybe the less simple, is you have to look at kind of this Genesis 1 account. And the way I would say is there are two things that you're going to see in this Genesis 1, and I would also like you to look in 3:8, but it's simple. The first one is God created us to work. He created us to work in this planet, to be his image bearers within it, and to then work and be a part of this. And so we're giving God glory because we're image bearers. Okay, not image bearers, but image bearers. Not bears. That would be weird. But we bear the image of God, and so we are to give that glory back. And so you see that the work part here is in there, and that we are to work the land, that we're supposed to have dominion over it for God. We're supposed to help, kind of like make this the best place it can be, not the worst place it can be. So I'm not saying like, big companies like let's trash the earth and leave it for, who else. But I am saying at the same point, like we are supposed to be working the earth to create and do wonderful things and that sort of stuff. The second thing, and you'll see in Genesis 3:8, it's very simple, very quick, just kind of one sentence. Okay. So it's when the cool evening breezes were blowing, the man and his wife heard the Lord God walking about the garden. So they hid from the Lord among the trees. And so you're like, okay, well, if you don't know the story, this is during the fall of man. And what you see is this picture. It's not an unusual thing for God to be walking in the garden with man. The idea is that God was living in a relationship, okay, with himself, with humans. Okay, it wasn't this like he wasn't distant, he was real close, he was connected. And so, why do I exist? We exist because God made us, and because God created us to live in the earth and to live within him, within the entirety, to have a relationship with him. And so, that's kind of that, like, I'm sure we could go even deeper into the, like, why do I exist sort of stuff. But in maybe my simple mind, that's kind of where I look at that. This is kind of the simplest answer I can give you that makes a ton of sense to me.
Yeah. Just a follow-up question with that. I do like the answer. Just for those who may not know what an image bearer is, I think that was a very big point that you made. What is an image bearer for a 9-year-old kid that may be watching this?
So an image bearer is simply, I mean, if you look back in that Genesis 1:26, right?
Yeah.
God said, oh man, here we go. I'm just off by just a second. Okay, here we go. Let us make human beings in our own image. It's not. Josh has said this in a past deep dive where it's not that he created us like to physically look like him, but we are created in the same essence of him. We are not God ourselves, but he breathed life into us. That we hold the image of the Almighty God. It separates us from dogs and cats and all the really fun animals, as well as all the non-fun animals, like spiders. Okay, although I love spiders, they're awful. They will bite you. Okay, don't do that. Okay, or even worse ones like cockroaches. We're not the same thing as cockroaches. And so when we think of image bearers, not image bears, image bearers, like we hold within ourselves the dignity of God, the personhood of God. Now, we are not God ourselves. Not saying that. What I am saying is that we reflect that who God is. We have that reflection within us. And so, like when we start talking about different debates, we walk into some of that sort of understanding that like why some things matter to us more than others, right? And I would agree. God didn't need us, but you notice all the things that he made. It wasn't because he was like existing in the void and being like, man, I just need something to love and I just need something to love me. No, he had that within the Trinity himself. It's that he created all of us to have that relationship with him. The best thing in the universe, that's what he's offering. And that's super cool and super fun. So that would be my like, why do I exist? Short answer.
Amen.
Maybe it's my long answer. I don't really know.
That was really, really good. I totally enjoyed that. I think for our next question is, what is my purpose in life?
Okay, so this is one of my favorite sort of kind of questions because I think there are some pretty easy, pretty good answers to this. So the first place I'd like you to turn here is to Matthew 22. Specifically 36 through 40. And this, arguably for me, is my favorite interaction that Jesus has with the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And to kind of just set the stage here of this, Jesus is like having this kind of like, he's teaching, and he's teaching just a bunch of different people, and they're asking him some questions, and they finally get him right. And so when the Pharisees heard that he silenced the Sadducees with his reply, they met again. They wanted to ask him a question to stump them, and they wanted to trap him with this question to get him to basically take his foot and put it directly in his mouth, and give them an in to discrediting him. And so they ask this question: Teacher, what is the most important commandment in the law of Moses? And Jesus replies, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. A second is equally important: love your neighbor as yourself. The entire law and all the demands of the prophets are based on these two commandments, which is kind of interesting because you notice that neither commandment that he points to is actually like in the Ten Commandments. That they are alluded to. He makes a really great case and a great point of all of the laws up to this moment have been pointing to these two things, these two most important things. And so he goes outside, so he stumps them. But my favorite is the next kind of part of that is they love to ask, they then love this question of then, who is my neighbor? How can I get out of loving everybody I don't like? And so purpose, right? My purpose. So the great commandment, love the Lord your God with all your mind, all your heart, all your strength, all your soul, everything you got. And the second is just as important: love your neighbor as yourself. And so we have this like purpose. So our purpose on earth is twofold, right? It's to love God and love others. Simply put, that's why you see that on so many different church kind of, you could walk into almost any Bible-believing church in the entire world, and you're going to see some level of that love God, love others in some variety somewhere.
Absolutely.
Because it's so ingrained, it's such an important part of our purpose. And if that's the first part, okay, I would say that's maybe a practical sort of, like understanding. Love God, love world, and you're like, okay. But the second is, right, like Jesus came, existed. And so what does that, a real kind of practical showing of that love become? Because we're an evangelical church, it's kind of important. This is one that I really like. But this is Matthew, 28, the last little bit here of Jesus' time on earth. So if we have the great commandment, the next place that we're looking is going to be, so love God, love other people. Well, what does it mean to love other people, right? He clearly states, love God with all your mind, heart, body, soul. So there's no question. You're just everything to God, you're giving it to him. That's your purpose. That's the purpose, is to give God, another way to say it is give his glory back, right? To stop stealing the glory that God has given you, because he's given you every gift, but to give it back. So this is like, it's kind of tomfoolery, but this is like the athlete at the end of the game. Okay, this is Stefon Diggs, now of the Bills, but after the Saints game that they won, and just improbable, and he's just like, I thank God, blah, blah, blah. Right, but it's that. Like, we're giving glory back to God, because the things that happen, we kind of impact, but we don't really impact a ton. We do some things, but ultimately it's God who gives us the gifts. It's God who gives us the things to do. And so we're just giving that back, loving God with everything we got. So the second part is the Great Commission. And this is a purpose that we all share. It's not one where just because there are different gifts or gifting that God has given us that somehow we're outside of this particular kind of umbrella of things that God has called us to do. And I understand it's very simple, but I think these two things are really the most important thing. And so the Great Commission is simply this, right? Jesus is about ready to ascend to heaven. He's already died. He rose again, save everybody their sins, right? And he says this to his disciples. This is the last thing he says, the last known thing that we know that he says, right? As Jesus told his disciples, I have been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Therefore, go and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given you, and be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. And so these kind of big ideas of purpose, guide us into the way that we live our life. And I know that it's kind of this blanket statement, but it really helps guide the different kind of, like, when you have that specific question, like, who would I date? Or you have that specific question of, like, what does it look like to love my family? When you have that, like, you start to look through these lenses. So the lens of the Great Commission is we're supposed to go tell people about Jesus, to make disciples of other people. That doesn't mean that we're all supposed to go to the street corner in Iowa City. You're not going to the Ped Mall and just evangelizing to everybody, which is a fancy way of just sharing your faith with everybody. But it does mean that Paul basically says, like, hey, everybody needs to have an account of why you believe what you believe. And so in that sort of sense, we're all supposed to be helping other people either become disciples or teaching them how to be disciples. So now if you look at that kind of the great commandment, you get this: love God with everything that you've got. Put your heart, body, soul, everything in there. And then also love other people. And the way that we love them is twofold, right? We act. We've got some works to do, okay? And the second thing is we tell them about Jesus, because ultimately, like, you have to share them Jesus. Because if you don't, the question is how much you really love them. Doug Schillinger often will say, or kind of quote this, but I think it's pretty common quote about the famous kind of Penn and Teller, right? Yeah. You heard this, right? The guy is a confessed atheist or agnostic, somewhere in those sorts of things. And he basically said, how much would you have to hate somebody if you believed you had the only way to heaven and you didn't share it? And that's from a non-Christian guy looking from the outside in. And so that when we look at, hey, love others like you would want to be loved yourself. I mean, I want to know how to get to heaven. I want to know how much God loves me. I want to know how to have a relationship with Jesus. And so, feeding people is incredibly important. Taking care of the sick, incredibly important. These are all things that Jesus has told us to do. But at the same time, if that's all we do, like if I went into your school and all I did was feed the poor and didn't tell anybody about Jesus, and when people ask me about it, I'm just trying to do my best. I'm just giving food, right? I don't really love them. I want them to stay alive here longer, but I'm not really giving them the tools to excel in life. And so this is the purpose, right? So now the interactions that we have, we love God, we love other people, and we want to share Jesus with them. And now we have a purpose and a lens. Maybe that's a better way of saying it. We have a lens to view life. And so when we are confronted with the hard things, with the difficult decisions or the too good things, like, we have a understanding of what it looks like to live a life of purpose, to love God and love other people.
I do like that. Just a side question. How old were you when you finally figured that out?
26. So, like, for me, I grew up in a wonderful youth group, a wonderful church. I grew up with a wonderful family. By all measures, I've lived a very privileged life. Yeah. I would be remiss to say anything but that. But I've always known, like, deep down, that I am a sinner full of sin. And it's an important thing. It was actually part of my 1 Timothy, this is a trustworthy saying, that Jesus Christ came to save sinners. Right? Beautiful thing that Paul writes, and then he writes, I'm the worst one. Now, in the grand scheme of things, like, I don't measure up to some people. I never murdered anybody. Yeah. I haven't done anything like that. But I still, like, I know my own heart. And so in my own heart, I know, like, man, I'm really sick. And so I lived in that kind of, like, I'm going to try and measure up. I didn't understand how much grace God had for me and how much he wanted me to love him and love other people. I just thought he wanted me to perform, right? Like like a coach on the sideline who's just ripping you a new one because, you're not performing. I thought that was God. And so it took me until I was in junior high to realize that, like, yeah, God desired a relationship with me. He wanted me to go to heaven. And I thought, oh, that's cool. I just want to go to heaven. And then, like, a couple of years later, after right around college, like, I really figured out that it wasn't just, oh, get to heaven. It was like, oh, I want you to love me now. And I want to have a relationship with you now. And I want you to then extend that love to other people. And that's, if you really look, that's when I started my life in youth ministry. I was just graduated from college. I had married my beautiful wife, and we were living in UNI. She was there, and I started volunteer with Prairie Lakes Church in Cedar Falls. And so there's a group of guys that are now post-college, which is incredibly crazy to me, that I was their small group leader, their 8th grade year. For 1 year, that was me and them. And so that's just kind of like, that's where I ended up. And there's a lot of different ways, that you can discover your purpose. And so that would be my statement.
My next question for you is, give me 1 second. How do I discover my purpose?
So this is the problem with me seeing the questions on the screen. I say things a little bit early, but so it's simple. The first one, I think the easiest answer is read your Bible. But when we really talk about maybe your purpose, I think probably the better question is like, how do I know like what job I'm supposed to do?
Yeah.
Or how do I know like what spouse I'm supposed to have? And so we get these kind of these like world views where we really track ourselves into one thing, right? That there's one thing that I'm supposed to do, and there's one thing that one person, that one soulmate, God made them just for me. And I want to just be honest, that is a load of hogwash. I've had multiple jobs. What I know, what I'm skilled at is working with students. And I really enjoy that. I think that I'm pretty good, at least at football, at offensive line and that sort of stuff, that I know my stuff and I feel confident. I have some skills in that. I have some pretty good interpersonal communication skills. And so when you look at, how do I discover my purpose? When you answer or ask that question, like, what job should I have? The question should be, can I love God to my fullest in that job? And can I love other people's in that job? So like, I would say one to me that I would never want, a job that I would never want to have is like an accounting job. Numbers and I are no good, no bueno. Okay, I might like nerdy games that involve numbers, but I don't like big numbers. And like I had a buddy, he's a math teacher in Waukee. His name is Jordan Edgerly. He's fantastic. He's a box. I love him. He's like, he was one of my groomsmen, but he is a math teacher. And so in college, he had to take math classes. And it was something he was passionate about. He was skilled at. Mm-hmm. But he also would have 3 problems and be up all night and sleep for 3 hours to get them done before his class the next day. And that to me sounded the worst. But I enjoyed German, so I did that. So like, there's not necessarily, we want to believe, there are lots of people in this world who are, I would call them type A people. They want to believe that there's a right and a wrong answer to like your job, your spouse, and all of those questions. My main answer is the question, you're not asking the right question if you're saying, oh, there's one job for me. There are many things that you are gifted in, but God has created a purpose for all of us. And it's summed up in the greatest commandment and the Great Commission. Okay. In sort of those kind of blanket sort of statements. And so when you look at that stuff, that's what we end up doing. Right? Oh, nice. I like the thinking face. That's good. So look at that guy. I like it.
Moving on to our next question is, what are spiritual gifts?
Man, spiritual gifts.
And what are their purposes?
Okay, so this is one, I would say there are a handful of things that we don't always like to talk about. Spiritual gifts is not necessarily one of them, but in general, like, I think it's important that we talk about it. So when we talk about giftings of the Spirit, what we have to understand is that there are a couple of different places where Paul has written about this. And the idea is that we're not all created the same. I would use the word equal, but we are all equal in God's eyes. We are all image bearers. And so the way that Paul, at the end of this 1 Corinthians 12, actually, he ends up talking about the believers in the church as being a body. And so like all of my parts, all the parts of Ronnie's body, try and work together to further his body, to further my body, to further my life, right? And so in that same sort of way, okay, the body of believers, we all do different things. We've all been gifted in different ways, okay, but we're all running after the same thing. So if you read it here, it's 1 Corinthians 12, 4 through, I think it ends up being like 12. So sweet, right? Nice and easy. So there are different kinds of spiritual gifts, but the same Spirit is the source of them all. So God gives the different gifts, but they all run from the same power, which is God. Okay? There are different kinds of service, but we serve the same Lord. God works in different ways, but it is the same God who does the work in all of us. So it's this idea, right? That like we're doing different things, we're gifted in different ways, but that's not bad. Okay, a spiritual gift is given to each of us so we can help each other. To one person, the Spirit gives the ability to give wise advice. To another, the same Spirit gives a message of special knowledge. The same Spirit gives great faith to another. And to someone else, the one Spirit gives the gift of healing. He gives one person the power to perform miracles and another the ability to prophecy. He gives someone else the ability to discern whether a message is from the Spirit of God or from another spirit. Still, another person is given the ability to speak in unknown languages, while another is given the ability to interpret what is being said. It is the one and only Spirit who distributes all these gifts. He alone decides which gift each person should have. And so, in kind of the idea of purpose and meaning and that sort of stuff, spiritual gifts are just, what are you gifted in? And there are different giftings for everybody. There are different strengths of everybody. And so if you follow along with the bodily kind of structure, right? Like some people are feet, some people are hands, some people are arms, some people are legs, some people are heads, some people are, whatever, any number of things. And so you get this. We're not all created in the exact same way. We don't all bear the same kind of like, this is the cookie cutter Christian, and this is what you're supposed to do. Like, we're not all Moses, which is great because Moses wasn't exactly the greatest of individuals, right? No. But we're not all called to be Paul. We're not all called to be Peter. We're not all called to be, we are called, right, to have an account. We're all called to love God, love everybody, okay? And then we're all called to share the gospel with people as best we can. But we're not all given the gift of evangelism, right? That means some of us are not gifted in going up to some stranger and being like, here's the gospel and you will believe, okay? But at that same point, that person who's gifted that way may not be gifted in the way to give good advice, right? Wise advice. So, like, that person who's a great evangelist may not be able to help you when you're dealing with a problem, and that's okay. And so when we get these gifts, what you want to look at then when you're trying to kind of decide where you're going in life is how can you best use the gifts that the Spirit has given you. And so in some of these, like, I would say, like, if God has given you, it's not necessarily a gift of the Spirit, but if you're like an athlete, that's, hey, like, as you pursue your athletic achievements, what you need to start looking at is, how can I love God and love others through this pursuit that I have, through this passion God has given me, through this natural ability that I have? And from that, then you're able to discern, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to work hard on this thing. When we start to pigeonhole ourselves into one thing, okay, one simple thing, right? God only created me to be a football coach. Well, that eliminates all of the gifts that God has actually given me. Yeah. If that's all I am, if that's all, and slowly that thing becomes an idol. Mm-hmm. And so, like, we want to, measure these things of, like, the spiritual gifts. What did I get? What do I have? What do people see in me? And what does God see in me? Those are the questions to be asking. The purpose of it is to further the gospel, to further the kingdom of heaven. If we were all really great evangelists, but we were terrible at giving advice, like, man, we'd have these Christians who all are doing dumb things because nobody's giving good advice, right? Or, wise counsel. It would be the same thing, right? Like, if we all had the ability, the spiritual gift of healing, but nobody, nobody was able to evangelize. We'd heal a bunch of people, but we wouldn't,
Have a story to tell.
right? And so this is where, when you get inside the church, when you get deep inside of kind of this following Jesus stuff, you want to surround yourself with other people with different gifts and work together with them. You don't want to surround yourself with just a bunch of people who are the same thing, because ultimately, if you had a body made up of hands, it would be weird.
Yeah.
Or a body made of eyes would die. And so in that same way, like we want to look at that, we want to do it that way and that sort of stuff. So
Absolutely. Hands, feet, head, heart.
hands, feet, head,
Yeah.
heart, lungs.
My next
head, shoulders,
question.
knees, and toes. Sorry. I have small children. We sang that anyways. Okay.
No, you were totally fine. The next one is this is kind of a two-part question, but how do I find meaning in my Christian life?
Okay. So again, it's hard because there are a bunch of questions within this. So we have kind of like three different.
Yeah.
Where do I personally find meaning?
Let's start with that. How do you find meaning in your Christian life?
Out of all of these questions, the thing that I attempt to do is going to end in arguably probably one of the most famous Philippians verses. It's like one that every athlete has ever and ever. Okay, it's Philippians 4:11 through 13. And so this is Paul writing to people, and he's thanking them. He's giving them some praise for what they have done for him, and then he's gonna talk about some things. So 11, right? Not that I was ever in need, for I've learned how to be content with whatever I have. I know how to live on almost nothing or with everything. I have learned the secret of living in every situation, whether it's with a full stomach or with empty or plenty or little, for I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength. Okay, so it's this idea. The idea for me, it's simply interesting. I try and be content with God. That's where I'm going. That's where I'm trying to find the meaning, the pressure, when I feel that pressure to perform or do whatever from other people, ultimately, right, I have to look to God. I have to look up and see what God really desires from me. And so when I read this, I understand that it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense for well, how do you find meaning? Well, look, you have to be able to be content with whatever God gives you. Because if not, you will always be wanting something else. You will always believe that your meaning is something more or different than what it is. And so as I look through, and I feel like meaning and purpose are pretty similar. The why I am here, right, is to love God and love others. And so with that, then I can be content in all of the situations. And I can answer and ask all of those kind of, those people that I can answer all of those questions that I need answered because I find it in God, in Jesus. And it's hard because I feel like it's such a cop-out to be like, oh, well, you find your meaning in God and you find your purpose in God. But if we believe the statement that Jesus Christ is the best thing that has ever happened to the world, then the answer has to be, he is the thing that gives us meaning, that drives my life. And so when I'm taking a look at things, and by no means am I perfect, right? I'm married. I'm very aware that I am imperfect, and I can be lazy and frustrating and all those sorts of things. And my wife is far more of a saint than I ever give her credit for. But she is, because I know that I struggle in this. We all struggle in this. But that's where, when we are looking for meaning, we have to look at Jesus. We have to look to the cross. We have to look at God, because he's the one who gives the meaning. So the meaning is the Great Commission. The meaning is the Great Commandment. And how do we respond to those things? And so I really want to answer all of those questions together, because it's what's the best way for a person to obtain happiness?
Yeah, and I think you kind of hit it.
You know, like I would ask that for you. Like, what do you think is the best way to obtain happiness? Is happiness really what we're even looking for?
If you would have asked me a few years ago, I would have thought attain happiness would be finding someone to be with and raising children. Because again, my background is not religious, and it wasn't grown into the church, so that was the reality of what happiness was to me. But happiness now, with looking at that, is for me knowing that I'm forgiven and knowing that I'm loved and that there's someone that loves me at my worst and at my best. And even when I feel like I'm at my best and I want more, I'm still loved. So when you said look at the cross, and that weighs a lot, and that's where I find true happiness because people will fail you, situations will fail you, but I haven't been in a situation where God has failed me. So that's really where I would find my happiness at.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what we're talking about. When we talk about happiness and that, I would even argue that our happiness isn't necessarily the point of any of this. Is love God, love other people. The byproduct of that is a life to the full. Not a life without pain or suffering, but a life that is significantly greater and better than anything else that we've ever done. Because God is at the center of it, because God is working through us, because we have an ability to like see what God is doing and then respond. And that's, man, I look at a lot of people who are looking for the next best thing, and you just I see Heather wrote, saint is a strong word. But that's the stuff that we are we are walking through and walking with. Man, God doesn't let you down. God won't let you down. And if you're a person, I would say absolutely. I think in a lot of cases, the church, not God, really romanticizes relationships.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
we really build them up, right? We have marriage seminars, and we get up in the pulpit and we tell you how awesome marriage is and how wonderful it is. And so as like a kid growing up that way, I thought, well, if I would just get married, I would be happy, right? And the answer is it's so far from the truth. It's not anywhere near the truth. You get married and you create a whole set of different problems, and then you have kids and they create their own set of problems. And so as you start to look, so if I was in junior high, okay, if I was in junior high and I was asking this question, how do I be happy? That my first answer would be focus on God. Focus on God first. Focus on Jesus. Focus on loving God with everything you've got. Love Jesus, everything you've got. Love, okay, your neighbors. Be the person that you would want to be around over and over and over again. Okay? The other stuff will or won't come, but what I can tell you is that sort of stuff will ultimately never let you down. I have never been disappointed with loving other people well. I've never been disappointed with like following Jesus. Where I hold the most amount of regrets is when I took it on myself to say whatever I wanted to say. Right? When I took it upon myself to make decisions about my life. You know, that's the stuff that ends up hurting my family, myself, any number of my friends, anything like that. So that would be, I would say I wouldn't necessarily worry about happiness. Happiness or joy is a byproduct, and we've been reading Lamentations for what seems like forever, is a byproduct of loving God and loving other people. And happiness is fleeting, comes and goes. Joy lasts forever. Joy can start now. You can always be joyful in the fact that Jesus Christ died on the cross for your sins so that when you believe, you get saved, so that you can have an eternal life that starts now and lasts forever. So that, yeah.
Yeah. My next question is my favorite one. I was
Okay.
really stoked about this is how do I find, oh, Josh, you took my question down. It's okay.
Which one?
Where, now I will go back to it. is we were going down to this next one because he had answered that in a few parts, is with dating.
Ooh, dating.
Yes. So
I love dating.
what should a relationship look like between a Christian dating and then moving into marriage? So let's answer the dating part. What does
Okay.
that look like first?
Well, let's start with first what is not talked about in the Bible. And that's a dating relationship because that was a concept they didn't have. Okay, and so when we're talking about dating itself, we're extrapolating. So that means we're looking at the text, we're looking at what Jesus said, we look at what kind of the tradition has been during that time and that sort of stuff, and then we take that and we apply it to our current like modern day sorts of things. So like things that would not fly, okay, in like old times, Tinder or any along that sort of stuff. Those weird dating apps are no. I think that's a big no for them in those days. And I think for us, I would question that as well, right? Because a lot of those are purely physical sorts of endeavors. And what we currently and constantly see from God is looking at the heart of people. And so I think the easiest way to take a look at kind of what a relationship between a Christian, okay, and maybe a non-Christian sort of dating relationship should look like is one of the things that I would say, okay, it's all going to be found in Ephesians 5, and there's this terrible word that nobody likes, and it's called submit. But I think it's super interesting that in verse 21, it says, and further submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. And then it goes on and kind of outlines two different ways for a man and a woman to like how you love each other well. Okay? But the first thing that you have to understand is you have to love each other. You have to die to each other and lift the other one up. That's ultimately like, if you read like what it says for husbands, in verse 25, it says, "This means love your wives, just as Christ loved the church. He gave up his life for her." So when you're a girl and you are thinking about pursuing a boy, the question that you have to start asking is, do I see that type of behavior in his life? Is he willing to, quote unquote, die for the women in his life, for his mother, for his sisters? Like, is he willing to put their needs above his own? Is he willing to outperform other people for them? And so, like, as you start to look at that, I would say these are the type of, you want someone who is very similar to that. Like, you need to find that person who's willing to die. The second thing, like for husbands, like when you're looking at a potential wife, what you have to look at is for wives, this means submit to your husbands as to the Lord. Okay, so I want to really preface this because I think this is we got to be real careful here about a good dating relationship. A good dating relationship for a female is not that you submit to everything he says. In fact, that's not even what this verse is necessarily saying. But it is saying, like, when you are married, the hierarchy that works best is that the husband is making decisions and the wife is also helping make those decisions, but someone has to have a final say. That's all this is really saying. Like, it's you work together and you should find a common answer as best you can, but at some point somebody has to make a decision. Yeah. And the Bible is saying, like, hey, let it be the husband. Whether it's for their pride or for just the way that it's working, it's an explanation. And so what you're looking for, guys, is you're looking for a spouse. How do they treat their dads? Are they respectful? Are they kind? Do they obey when they don't necessarily agree? Now, again, with things that are not life and death. Like, does she stick around if someone is physically hurting her? That's not a great no. That we should remove somebody from that sort of a situation. But if that person is saying, hey, for the betterment of your life, you're not getting on social media. Is she going behind his back and getting on social media? Like, these are the things, because ultimately you're looking for a wife who ultimately is willing to put others in front of herself. And so when we look at a dating relationship, I think it's really, really, really important here, okay, to say that we're not looking for a husband-wife relationship at a dating stage. What you are looking for is, does that person have the qualities that would make me want to have that? So if you start, like, let's say the attraction level, right? You find a guy, and we'll say you're attracted to him or her, whatever. Like if you're a male and you're attracted to a female, you are pursuing them, hopefully, because in the interactions that you've had, they've displayed that they love God, they love others, that they're trying to share their faith with people, and whatever that looks like. Those are the three like main things. Hopefully, that's super attractive to you. And then you're looking at, do they make great decisions? Because like if you're a female and you're looking and reading this kind of thing, are they the type of person you would want to follow? If they're not, abandon that relationship. Get out of Dodge. Okay? If they're verbally or emotionally abusive, there is no way ever you should stay there. You should get help. You should do what you need to do. Right? In the same way for a guy, if you find a woman who fights with you all the time about everything that you say, man, you should run from that relationship because it's not going to get better. And you know, we know that this ultimate, my father-in-law says this, and I think it's gold. I don't know if he stole it from somebody else, but I will always say it. The type of marriage relationship that you're looking for, the type of spouse, the potential spouse that you're looking for, is someone who gives 100%, expects 0%. But we're all giving 100%. Like I'm expecting to give Heather everything that I've got and expect nothing in return. In that same token, Heather is giving everything she's got, but wanting nothing back. Like it's that like level of service that you're looking for between each other. Now, in that, right, people are sinful and broken and create problems that like it's awful.
Yeah.
And so we need to be really careful and safe about that sort of like training, because again, we're not trying to train people to stay in abusive relationships. We're not trying to train people to say that men are better than women. When you look at the Genesis story, right, man was incomplete without woman, right? Like we were in a great relationship with God, but we needed somebody else to come alongside to help, right? And so like the term again here, I'm pretty confident the word that is here, the helper word, right, is the same word that God uses for the Holy Spirit. So if a woman is being, in that same sort of like, that same sort of word usage is what she does, she's a pretty important endeavor.
Absolutely.
And now, in this, right, we can say this. Right now, just through this statement alone, we've kind of put marriage and dating on a pedestal. One of the hardest things, junior high and high school, is how do you live life single well?
Yeah.
And so, like, don't be ashamed of that. I went through junior high. I'm not even lying here. I went through junior high wishing somebody would date me. I wanted somebody to date me so bad. Man, it was clearly an idol for me. And what I would want you to hear from me is Paul really calls being single a blessing, because you don't have to share your love with anybody. You give it all to God. He's saying at the end of the day, being single allows you to love God with everything you got. Because if I'm being honest here, right? Like my love can be split between trying to do exactly what God wants me to do within this particular ministry, and also like loving her to the best of my ability. Sometimes those don't always run along the same lines. And so a single person, like you in high school or junior high, you can run fully after God. You can develop some really good habits because you are completely engaged with Jesus. And so when we say things like, oh man, who are you going to date or this or that, like it's important for us to understand that the first thing that Jesus said, right? Jesus, fully God, was also what? Fully
Man.
single.
No, don't you say Jesus was fully
He
man?
is. He's both. Fully God, fully man, and 100% single.
I think even to add something to that is even being married is submission is earned You don't just get married and it's like you submit to me. It's
Yeah.
a gift that your wife provides to you is
Yeah.
as she's trusting, like my wife says, I'm trusting the Lord inside of you. And that's when I'm
Oh, that's
able
a
to
great-
submit. And that was something
Man,
that
good
was
one.
super weird. Is like, I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, I'm gonna trust the Lord inside of you that He's doing this, and out of that is a gift of submission. But also, I love the part where you were talking about with dating websites. It's just pure attraction, but we always forget how do we serve the Lord with this person? Because if we look back in the book of Genesis with Adam, Adam was in the garden and then Eve came alongside him as a helpmate. And we have to say, is this relationship making me holy? Because marriage is
Yep.
not solely just about being happy, it's
Yep.
about me being made holy. It's that term of iron sharpening iron.
Absolutely.
And like for me, like I do student ministries, but Connie comes alongside that, and
Yeah.
she's very administrative and very type A.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times, like even for you, there's a lot of things that Heather does that people don't necessarily see. Like our wives are those people that are on the side, like when you show up one time for a meeting, it's because Heather's probably like, this says about time and this and that. And it's like, with this person, are they making me holy? And am I serving the Lord better with them?
And so I just like again, this is not a like you have to be dating or you should be dating. I'm not saying that. We all need that personal, intimate relationship with another something, and that doesn't mean I made sure I said something right because it doesn't mean dating. Like Jesus ultimately comes first. That's why when asked, hey, what's the greatest commandment? What's the best thing you can do? He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, body, soul.
Amen.
And you notice how I keep coming back to that when we're talking about all these different sort of like things. So it would be the question of like, do I go to this maybe this party, right? Well, what's my purpose? Love the Lord my God with all my heart, all my strength, all my soul, and love others as myself. And so within that, now I'm starting to use that and saying, okay, well, do I go to that place? There's going to be some bad things there. So I don't necessarily know if that would be the smartest decision. So maybe, I won't go to that thing because my purpose is to love God with everything I got. And that would ultimately compete with that love. But at the same point, maybe it is go, right? Because I need to love other people as myself. I love God fully. And so I want to go evangelize to somebody, or I want to go show love to somebody. And so I go to that thing. And so when we talk about these relationships and that sort of stuff, you got to view it through the lens of your purpose and meaning. And if your purpose is meaning is to love God with everything you've got and love other people as you love yourself, as God loves you, then by golly, man, you have a great kind of answer. And to understand again, right, there are no right or wrong answers. So as you're choosing, right, somebody to love, you don't have a soulmate. I just want you to understand that. The only soulmate that you have is God because He created you. He created you for a relationship with Him. And He wants that, desires that. And so what you have is a group of individuals who you could potentially marry or love. And what happens in marriage is you make a commitment to love. Love is a verb, okay? Love is action. It's something you choose. It's not, I fell into love. Oh no, I tripped. It was awful or wonderful. I don't know. The answer is like, look, you can be infatuated with a person. You walk into a room and you see like a very attractive person, you can be very infatuated right away. But that's not love. Love is commitment. Love is working hard for a relationship to create a level of like care and concern for each other. Love is loving God and trying to figure out how your lives could connect together. And I want to say this, it's an important thing to say. It doesn't matter, okay, how far down the road you are. If you realize it's a mistake, you need to get out. And it's a super, super important thing for you to understand. Like just because you made a mistake, like doesn't mean you have to own it for like the entire rest of your life. Like if you start dating someone and you realize very quickly like they're not the person for you, get out. Yeah. If it takes you like if you're 2 years in and you're pretty well connected with their family and everything, it's not going to get better between them and you. Okay? Like you need to go and get out. And that's okay. Like it's the same thing, right? Like if you buy something you shouldn't have bought, like that doesn't mean you have to own it for the rest of your life. Sell that thing, get rid of it. Now, once you make a marriage decision, my tune is going to change a little bit. Once you have made that commitment to love that person for the rest of their life, you need to try and find a way. You need to exhaust every single avenue before you're looking to get out. Okay? And I think it's really important to kind of umbrella this with, if you're at fear for your physical life, you need to, like, I'm not at all ever going to tell you, hey, you just need to, listen to what he says. Nope. Get out. Get out first. Get safe first. Let's get you to a safe place and move on from there. Then we can figure out. Maybe there's a chance that you guys reconcile. Maybe not. But the answer is not, hey, you just need to just buck up, soldier. Okay? Or if you're in a dating relationship that goes south quickly, out. Get out. Get out. Get out. Get out. Tell everybody, come tell me, come tell Ronnie, like, look, get out now. Don't wait. So I just want to be, I think it's always important when we talk about this sort of stuff to, like, not take this to a place where you think what I'm really saying is, like, hey, you just, like,
Submit to your boyfriend and just.
yep. I'm saying don't do that right now. You don't need to submit to everything that his whims and desires. Not now. What you're trying to figure out, is he the type of man that you would want to do that?
Yeah.
Like, would you be willing to trust him with that level of commitment? That, like, you're going to give him, you may not agree with him and say, I don't think we should do this, but I'm going to let God, I'm going to let the God who's working in you have control over this. And so that's kind of the thing that I would tell you, like, as we go through this, there's so much more that we could talk about dating relationships.
Yeah.
Tomfoolery at its best.
And then we have room for one last question before we end our time. It's kind of a lighthearted question. If you were to die a year from today, on Thursday, what would you do and how would you want to be remembered? You have 3 minutes.
What would I want to do if I had a year to live? My thing is different. I would really want to love my family well. I would want to be the best dad that I could be in that time.
Mm-hmm.
I would want to create some things for the kids, like going forward post my death. And then I would really want to do my job well.
Yeah.
As weird as that sounds, I wouldn't want to stop working. It's just weird. If I could continue working, I would want to continue working because I love what God has done for me, what I believe God will do for kids and for other adults like this, that this is such an incredible, important thing that we are all a part of. Like, I wouldn't want to just, like, not. So, I mean, like, in that sort of sense, it would be a fine line because ultimately, like, I want my wife to know how much I love her, how much I care about her. I want my kids to know how much I love and care about them. And we'd probably play a few more Minecraft games and some Mario Brothers with Marshall and, play dress up with Lark and that sort of stuff and do that sort of stuff. But that would be, like, ultimately what I would want to do. Want to do this job to the absolute best of my ability so that kids can learn about Jesus and know Jesus and get connected into small groups. And so when I went, I wasn't worried about what everybody else was doing. I would know, hey, we've set this thing up that God has ordained and God has been a part of, and we have a chance to do something special here at Parkview with Parkview Student Ministries on the East Campus, at Central Campus, at North Campus, that everybody's just, like, going. It'd be super fun. So, and also really sad. I don't want to leave my family.
Yeah.
If I don't have to, not yet.
Yeah.
But if that's what God calls me to do, that's what I'll do. So I get to go be with Him.
I want to mourn you. I don't want to.
I love it. Hey, we are post our
4:30.
time. So what I will say, what I'd like to say, if you have any questions at all, any questions for Ronnie or myself, I said Ronnie and pointed to me, myself or Ronnie,
Like the word.
okay, whatever. We look very similar, in my personal
Clearly.
opinion. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Ooh, the smolder. Just ask a question. We'd love to hear about it. Otherwise, we'll give you a little bit of time and then we'll sign off. So if you've got a question for us about literally anything, we'll answer it.
I do have something.
Oh, Okay.
What time does Sunday evening start?
All right, this is easy. Sunday starts at 7, and we're gonna do another Kahoot.
AM?
PM, 7 p.m.
Yeah.
at night. Okay, and we're gonna do a Kahoot. It's gonna be bigger, badder, and this time it'll work. And that's what we're gonna do. So if you're interested in that, we're gonna have a prize because it's gonna work, it's gonna function, which means I can offer a prize.
love
It'll probably be a gift card, maybe to the, I don't think movie
Everything
theaters.
is opening up.
Does movie theaters?
No, not movie theaters,
See?
but IHOP is open.
Ooh!
IHOP is gonna open back
Okay.
up. Yeah.
So anyway, well, I think we got another IHOP gift card in there. So,
Pancakes on deck.
whoop, whoop.
Or
I don't know. Or on a plate. Plate
On a
is
plate,
good.
yeah, not
I
on deck.
like plated pancakes.
I don't know if people eat pancakes on decks, maybe.
And then, if you haven't noticed, we've been doing a First Timothy study. We're in day 3 of that.
Yep.
Lindsay, right? It was
Yeah.
Lindsay today, and I was yesterday, and on Monday we did an overview. So.
And Lindsay's gonna teach on Sunday.
Lamentation. We're gonna finish Lamentations. We're gonna lament one last time
One
together,
last time.
but maybe a little more positive lamenting.
Lamenting.
Lamentai.
Lent. We're gonna lent one more time.
All right, guys. Well,
Bye, guys.
thanks for watching. If you watched the whole time, thank you so much. We'll be back at it next week with our community, and I think we might even go a little bit more into dating and relationships. If you're really interested in that, like come back next week. It'll be Sarah, Lindsay, and myself. I'm just gonna be asking questions. We'll get a lady's opinions in here. So